Okay, so let me ask you a question. If I told you that back in August 2015, some guy posted a public warning on Facebook
hmm
saying a world population cull would begin specifically in the year 2020, what would you say?
I would probably tell you to, maybe log off the conspiracy forums for a bit. Go outside. Yeah,
Exactly, go touch some grass. And look, 99 times out of 100, you'd be right.
absolutely. The internet is just full of people throwing dates at a wall, right? Hoping something eventually sticks.
Right. But what if I then showed you that this fringe prediction, it lines up almost to the day with corporate planning schedules from global health organizations.
Okay.
And that 5 years later, when the world did shut down, a massive psychological experiment was run on everyone, documented by the World Economic Forum, by the way, that we are, well, arguably still recovering from.
See, that's where things stop being a coincidence
Mm.
and start getting, well, really uncomfortable. And that's pretty much where we are today.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a little different. We aren't just looking at one article or one study.
No.
We're looking at a whole stack of sources that is, to put it mildly, eclectic.
Eclectic is a very polite word for it, yeah.
We've got a timeline document called Prophetic Architectures.
All right.
We have some visual data on something called Torah codes and population estimates.
Okay.
We have a 2020 article from a top psychologist for the World Economic Forum and a very recent, very official confession letter from Mark Zuckerberg.
It just sounds like a mess when you list them like that.
It does.
You've got mystics, you have billionaires, you've got scientists. But the whole mission for this deep dive is to see how these wildly different sources, how they intersect.
Right.
Because when you lay them all out chronologically, they don't look like a mess anymore.
What did it look like?
They look like a timeline.
A timeline of prophetic warnings leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the question we're asking isn't just who knew what. It's about the intersection of these fringe predictions, corporate planning, and, the psychological aftermath.
How did three totally different groups all seem to see the exact same catastrophe coming?
And why did we only listen to one of them? So let's just dive in. I want to start with this timeline document, Prophetic Architectures. It's basically a list of dates and events, but it pairs them with these really specific predictions.
And the first thing that jumps out is this idea of a population cull.
Yeah, that one.
Right. And this comes from a source image. It's labeled 1.jpg in our stack. It's a graph of world population estimates.
You've probably seen a graph like this.
Oh, yeah. It traces population growth from, like, the 1800s all the way to 2100. It's that classic hockey stick curve that just goes straight up.
But it's not just a graph. There's text superimposed right on top of the curve, and it's referencing the book of Revelation, specifically Revelation 14.15.
Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe.
A little ominous to start the morning with.
Just a bit.
But the timeline, it highlights a specific Facebook post by a figure named Richard Peter Ruff. He's also called the Prime Cleric in the documents.
And the date on this post is August 13th, 2015.
That date is so important. August 2015. I mean, we are 5 years pre-pandemic here.
Yeah, Obama's in the White House. The world is a very, very different place.
And in this post, Ruff explicitly claims a world population cull is coming. But he doesn't just say someday.
No, he gives a start date.
He says the cull starts in the year 2020.
He nails the exact year, 5 years in advance.
That's unbelievable.
And that's what makes this source material so sticky. Usually prophecies are super vague. A great calamity will befall the West.
Right, that could be anything. A stock market crash, a hurricane.
A bad election.
Yeah.
But 2020 is a hard number. And the timeline puts this spiritual, this fringy prediction right next to something very secular.
Corporate plan.
Exactly, the planning of global health organizations.
And this is where Bill Gates comes in. The timeline points to a TED Talk from February 2010.
Yes, the Innovating to Zero talk. This is very well documented. Gates is talking about how to get CO2 emissions down to zero. He gives this formula involving population, services, energy.
And he says something that has been, well, it's been debated ever since.
He says that if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower world population growth by maybe 10 to 15%.
Now, to be fair, the mainstream interpretation of that is that he's talking about slowing the rate of growth.
Right. Not a cull in the sense of, killing people who are already here. It's about healthier families choosing to have fewer children.
Of course. But the timeline argues the focus is what's similar. You have the mystic predicting a cull in 2020. And you have the philanthropist openly planning for population management using vaccines in the lead up to that same era.
It creates this picture of converging timelines. One is spiritual, one is corporate.
And both are zeroing in on the same moment in history.
And there's this little detail in the source notes about Gates's reading habits that just adds a layer of irony to all this.
Oh, the book thing. Right. March 14th, 2015. He apparently revealed his favorite book is How to Lie with Statistics.
Which, I mean, given the controversies over death counts, case numbers, vaccine efficacy rates, all the things that define the pandemic.
It's a title that raises a few eyebrows.
A little on the nose, maybe.
A little bit. But if we fast forward on this timeline to right before the pandemic hits, things get really tight. We have to talk about Event 201.
October 18th, 2019. This is documented fact. The Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins, they all hosted this high-level pandemic exercise in New York.
And what did they simulate?
They simulated a global outbreak of a novel coronavirus.
A coronavirus.
Yes.
Not the flu, not Ebola, a coronavirus.
Exactly. They modeled the transmission from animals to humans, the global spread, the economic impact. This was October 2019.
2 months before the first cases were identified in Wuhan. It's like they wrote the script before the movie started filming.
And then you see the tweet from Bill Gates. December 20, 2019, this is literally days before the world learns the word COVID.
What's he say?
He tweets that he is excited for 2020.
Excited.
And he specifically calls 2020 a year for best buys in global health vaccines.
So on one track, you have a mystic in 2015 saying 2020 is the year of the cult.
And on the other track, you have the world's biggest vaccine advocate in late 2019 saying 2020 is going to be great for vaccines.
They are looking at the exact same year through two totally different lenses. One sees a tragedy, the other sees an opportunity.
But the timing is identical.
But the predictions didn't stop with just the date. This is where the Torah codes come into play. And I have to admit, when I first saw Torah codes in the source stack, I was skeptical.
Oh, for sure. It feels a little Da Vinci Code, doesn't it?
It really does.
And it's healthy to be skeptical. For anyone who doesn't know, Torah codes, it's a method where people look for hidden messages in the Hebrew text of the Torah by skipping letters at equal intervals.
The source material has pictures of these matrices. They look like a crossword puzzle with no black squares, just a block of Hebrew letters.
Exactly. And the idea is that these matrices have encoded information about future events. Now, whether you believe that's divine or just statistical coincidence is up to you.
Right.
But what we can analyze are the dates the findings were published.
And the timeline gives us those dates. Let's look at this one from October 7, 2019. Again, it's from Richard Peter Ruff. And the post is titled, Silence from Tevet 5780.
Okay, so Tevet 5780, that's the key. It's a month in the Hebrew calendar.
And when is that on our calendar?
If you convert it, it covers the period from December 29, 2019 to January 26, 2020.
Okay, let's just pause on that. He posts this in October 2019. He's predicting a silence that begins in a window that starts December 29th.
Uh-huh.
When did China publicly announce the outbreak?
December 31st, 2019.
2 days into that window.
2 days into that specific window.
That is wild. He calls the shot 3 months out, and the event lands 2 days inside his predicted window.
And it gets more specific. On January 25, 2020, still inside that Tevet window, Ruff posts another code interpretation. This one is called the corona, that virus.
And the keywords they found in that code matrix are, well, they're pretty disturbing. You've got deceit, body, insolence, endemic, and merging, or syneresis.
Syneresis is a fascinating word choice.
Yeah, I had to look that one up. It sounds medical.
It is. In a biological context, like with blood clotting, it's when a gel contracts and squeezes out liquid. It's a tightening, a drawing together.
Put in a social context.
Well, think about what happened in early 2020. The world contracted. We all retreated into our homes. Borders closed. Economy shrank. It was a global syneresis.
A squeezing of society.
Mm-hmm.
But the word that really stands out to me in that list, especially given everything that happened later, is silencing.
Silencing. So the prophecy wasn't just about a virus. It was about a silence that would descend.
And if you look at how the pandemic actually played out, silence is a really powerful metaphor for what happened.
I'd say it's more than a metaphor. I mean, we saw mandates that literally covered mouths with masks. We saw empty streets where the noise of city life was just gone.
But also the silencing of information.
That's the insidious part. Mandates, blacklisting, banning. The timeline argues that the silence predicted in that code was actually the censorship regime that kicked into high gear.
Which brings us to the big question, right? Was that silencing just a theory? Or was it a coordinated reality? Because for a long time, if you said, I think I'm being silenced, you were immediately labeled a conspiracy theorist.
You are.
And that is the perfect transition to our next source,
Huh.
because we don't have to guess anymore.
We have an admission.
We do. We have an article from The Guardian from August 27, 2024, and the headline is, Mark Zuckerberg says White House pressured Facebook to censor COVID-19 content.
And this isn't some rumor. This is a formal letter Mark Zuckerberg sent to the U.S. House Judiciary Committee.
He admits that in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration were repeatedly pressuring Meta,
That's Facebook and Instagram.
right, to censor content.
Right.
And he says they expressed a lot of frustration when Meta didn't agree fast enough.
But what were they censoring? Was it just dangerous stuff like, drink bleach?
No, and that's the key detail that really backs up this silence theory. Zuckerberg admitted they were pressured to censor humor and satire.
Fire.
Jokes. They were censoring jokes.
Wow. And beyond that, they demoted information suggesting the virus might have come from the lab leak theory.
And criticism of vaccines. Things that are now considered, open for legitimate debate were, at the time, completely silenced.
Zuckerberg literally says, and this is a quote, "I believe the government pressure was wrong." He says he regrets not speaking out more.
So let's connect that back to the Torah code from 2019. The code predicted deceit and silencing. 5 years later, the CEO of the world's biggest social media platform confirms the government pressured them to silence dissent, silence humor, and suppress theories that turned out to be plausible.
It's like the prophecy was describing the mechanism of control before the control even started.
Exactly. The silence wasn't just quiet streets. It was an active suppression of speech. It was an information war.
So we've got the predicted date, 2020. We've got the predicted mechanism, silencing.
So now we have to talk about the cost. Because while everyone was focused on the virus and the censorship, something else was breaking.
And this is where we turn to the World Economic Forum.
Which is funny, right? Because usually the WEF is seen as the architect of these plans in conspiracy circles. But here
Here you have a WEF article from April 9th, 2020 that is sounding a massive alarm bell.
the article is by a Dr. Elke van Hoof. She's a professor of health psychology. And the title is, Lockdown is the world's biggest psychological experiment, and we will pay the price.
She uses this brilliant analogy of the two tents.
Can you break that down?
Yeah, it comes from the French crisis response model. The idea is that in any disaster, a terror attack, a flood, a pandemic, you need two tents. The first tent is medical.
For the physical wounds,
Yeah.
the infections, the broken bones, triage.
Right, stop the bleeding. But you immediately need a second tent. And this is the psychological field unit. It's for the invisible wounds, the trauma, the shock, the stress.
And her argument is that in 2020, the entire world frantically built the first tent.
And completely ignored the second tent.
We had field hospitals in Central Park, ventilators, masks, but we had 2.6 billion people in lockdown with absolutely no psychological support.
She calls it the largest psychological experiment ever conducted. And she had data from Belgium that showed how fast the damage happened.
These numbers are staggering. She says before lockdown, 32% of the population was green, meaning resilient, handling stress well.
And after just 2 weeks of lockdown, that number dropped to 25%.
And the red group people with toxic levels of stress.
That jumped to 25%. 1 in 4 people were in the danger zone within 14 days.
And she predicted a secondary epidemic.
Yes. She warned that 3 to 6 months after the lockdowns, we would see a massive spike in burnout and absenteeism. She was basically warning that by ignoring the second tent, we were creating a long-term mental health disaster.
It's just tragic because looking back now, she was 100% right.
Completely.
We saw the burnout. We saw the great resignation where people just quit their jobs. We saw the mental health crisis in kids who were kept out of school.
It just validates the idea that the response, the silencing, the lockdowns, had these massive costs that were predicted but ignored.
The second tent was never built.
It was never built because the silence prevented people from even asking for it.
That's the connection. If you can't speak, you can't say, hey, I'm hurting.
Exactly. You were only allowed to worry about the virus. If you worried about depression or your business failing, you were told you were being selfish. That was the silence at work.
So let's zoom out. We've gone through the timeline. Predictions, censorship, the psychological impact, what happened after 2020. The prophetic architectures document keeps going.
It does. It notes that in July 2020, Bill Gates and George Soros jointly bought a company called Malogic, a global healthcare enterprise. Again, consolidating control over testing and health tech.
And then 2021 arrives, the vaccines roll out.
And the timeline source notes a real shift here. It starts citing reports of a huge spike in unexpected deaths and injuries. It specifically uses the phrase died suddenly, which became a recurring headline.
About young, healthy athletes or celebrities collapsing.
Yeah, which again ties all the way back to that original 2015 prediction of a cull. Whether you see it as a virus or a reaction to the solution, the timeline argues the cull happened.
And then you get a crack in the dam, October 27, 2022,
Elon Musk buys Twitter,
and releases the Twitter file.
which just proved that the silence wasn't accidental. It was engineered. It showed the emails, the direct lines between government agencies and Twitter executives.
Which leads us right up to Zuckerberg's admission in 2024.
It's a full circle. We started with a mystic predicting a cull and silence. We moved through the corporate planning of vaccines. We saw the implementation of that silence through censorship. We saw the psychological fallout. And then finally, we have the admission from the tech giants that, yes, they were pressured to make it all happen.
It really makes you wonder about the nature of these prophecies. I mean, was Richard Peter Ruff literally seeing the future? Or was he just reading the room really, really well?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Whether you believe in the spiritual side of the Torah codes or not, the accuracy on the dates and the themes, silence, deceit, 2020, it's hard to dismiss.
It aligns almost perfectly with the corporate and political timeline.
And that WEF article adds that layer of human tragedy. We were the subjects in an experiment. We were the data points on the chart.
And we were kept in the dark, silenced while it was all happening.
So what do we do with all this? We have hindsight now. We have the roadmap of the past. But we can't change 2020.
No. But the lesson here has to be about critical thinking and the value of that second tent. We cannot allow silence to be the default response to a crisis.
Right. Censorship, even of humor, as Zuckerberg admitted, it just blinded us. It stopped us from asking basic questions.
Think about it. If we'd allowed open debate in 2020, maybe we would have built the second tent. Maybe we would have balanced physical safety with mental health.
We have to value open dialogue. We have to be able to talk about the lab leak or the second tent without being deplatformed.
Because if these sources tell us anything, it's that the plans for these events, whether they're spiritual or corporate, are often laid out years in advance.
Which brings us right back to where we started. If we paid attention to the cull post in 2015, or the silence code in 2019, or the second tent warning in April 2020, could we have changed the outcome?
Maybe. But only if we were willing to listen to the warnings that made us uncomfortable. We have to be willing to look at the fringe, look at the weird data, and just ask, what if?
That is the big takeaway. Don't dismiss a warning just because you don't like the messenger.
And it raises one final provocative thought for everyone listening.
What's that?
We've seen that the silence and the cull were predicted with startling accuracy years before they happened. We've seen the mechanism was visible if you knew where to look. So the question isn't about the past anymore.
It's about right now.
What are we missing today?
Exactly. What warnings are flashing red right now in the corners of the internet, in the footnotes of corporate reports, or in some fringy prediction that we are all ignoring simply because they seem too strange or too uncomfortable to look at? What is the next second tent that we are failing to build?
That is going to keep me up tonight. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Keep your eyes open.
And keep asking questions.